This is Suffolk House Hotel. Chit.
We've got a friend who opens the garden on the way to Bracklesham Bay, Eartham, not Eartham, John Williams, who was the maxillofacial surgeon. He opens his in.
Does he?
Have you ever been?
No.
They made it from a field 3 years ago, and it's absolutely gorgeous.
The ducks have to swim up against.
I know. Look at them. They're just
having a big struggle.
This is the Rose and Crown in Salisbury.
That's right. Hello. We're having a good time.
that I've been talking about for 3 years in Salisbury, and you can see the cathedral spiral. Do you see that, George, over there?
A terrific wind.
Well, they said the wind was really coming up. As long as we can get, and the wind, I think the clouds are going to be okay. You see the green one on the couple of the greenhead ones, the mallards or whatever they are on the right, George?
On the right?
Yeah, the right of the swans. You see the right under the trees. All cleaning themselves.
Well, we've got the right place to sit. Look. Back of it.
Yeah, but we can go around.
But I wonder why. Why?
We can go around.
What was the reason for things up on hold?
I don't know. The east window is dedicated to prisoners of conscience throughout the world.
The prison?
That movie is unbelievable. Look at up here.
That's the organ. Yeah.
Here are some pencils. Isn't that pretty?
My other one? See, look at the front. What? This is a 7.2.
All right, George, I just walked in front of
It's
you.
my birthday present. I
Big
got it on
close-up shot of
Thanksgiving.
me, George.
I love it.
Maybe a little too close. Min, do you want something to drink?
All right, just gather over
You
here.
can't have a
Here.
Diet Coke?
There's
Oh, yeah,
free.
we're taking a
No,
picture
I
of the
like
whole room. Please don't move away, just,
The reason we were late was because they wouldn't let anyone get on the train until the guy in the handcuffs was out of there.
Oh, so the train was late coming in,
No, it was there, but we weren't allowed to get on it until he was out.
but
of
it was late coming into New York?
Oh, sort of.
gosh. Oh, gee.
Oh, gee.
Gee whiz, by golly.
Sorry. I'm so hot.
I know.
It's really hot in there.
My stomach really
I
hurts.
love this knife, George. Old timer on it.
Yeah, that's what I carry in my pocket.
This is pumpkin pie.
I'll have a pumpkin.
Oh, to the couch. You're waiting about pumpkin pie.
What hospital?
Mount Sinai.
Oh, Mount Sinai. All right. Which is on what street?
That's where you had your operation.
That's where they
That's
chopped
up.
off the ring.
Oh, all right. Oh, by the way, how does it fit? It's just okay, or is it still too tight?
The next time that I will have to take it off, I'll go straight to the fire department. I'm not going to wait like an hour and a
Is
half.
it too tight?
No, it's
What
okay.
happened? Your cut
Oh,
off your
it's
circulation?
Here, put it. You can eat one. Do you want ice? Would you like ice cream or whipped cream?
Both, probably.
Either one?
No.
Okay.
Tiny.
I got ice cream and whipped cream.
Here, wait now.
And
I
a
had
free
two
dessert.
pies.
What's the
I don't know.
Grammy, would you like some
Looks
whipped
good.
cream?
Thank you.
All right, here. Where do you want us?
Okay,
Can
where's
I
the-
stand? I don't want to sit because I'm too fat. I'll stand.
Why don't you sit next to your grandmother?
Mom, are you gonna sit next
No,
to
I'm
me?
not going to sit because my thighs are too big.
Whoever I have next to is fine.
Well, I think Diana's
yeah,
going to
right,
take it,
video.
George. So you can be in it.
I'm trying to be enigmatic as possible.
Are you taking
That's it.
Oh, this is
I
I
wonder.
thought
Yeah.
George, Diana's going to take
There's
it.
a camera.
Yeah, George, you have to come in. How can you take it with the thing on?
I can see through the peepholes.
All right.
But we want to see you in the
Here,
photograph.
Diana.
Yeah.
Here, George, you can come stand right over here.
Wait a minute, I got to take one of Grammy.
But we all have the wrong masks on. Or is that supposed to be
That's
funny?
funny.
This is the idea. Is
Oh, one.
irony.
Oh, see.
I know, but George is going to come in the picture. We
George,
gotta-
wait,
George, wait
picture.
for George. You don't have
he won't give up his camera.
There you go.
George,
Sir, can you
Diana's
go?
going
I
to
will take one picture on this camera.
Oh, no, he just wants to take a
Oh, you're on candid camera.
Don't look around.
Very natural. Nobody wants to sit next to Mom.
This is Cynthia's house in Sedona. Gotta put the date on.
All right, George,
It's all right.
you were asleep
No,
when I left to bring Holly to school, and then I went over to, I take the dog up to the park, and then I went to Tish's. Your grape nuts. You like to combine it with
this is my bedroom, spare bedroom.
all right. I like them because you could get at it.
Yeah,
Why don't you like them?
I guess. But this is all broken. So I've got to get some little nails. I'm going to get some little nails in here. But I think this is.
Oh, you just need little tack.
Yeah, yeah. And I need.
I'll look for some at my house.
Silver.
I may have.
I might have some too. But I think this is silver.
Oh, I know. I'm sure it is.
But and then I just have to. You know what I mean? There we go. Oh,
Tish, I have silver cloth,
okay.
which will
Whatever.
be much easier for you to polish it.
Okay.
Now, Mary Louise called Dragons again.
Oh, yes, she told me. I called her.
She was about 20 minutes on the phone with me talking about, well, I'm going to have one dragon coming out from the plant.
Yeah, she said I said, no, I thought you all figured it out. She said, well, I don't know, I'm kind of working it
Yeah,
out.
she loves those dragons.
Yep. No, that was
It's
the perfect.
made her, because she has the Indian picture above it
Yes.
that has the blues,
Yep.
blue and greens.
Well, Cindy will be thrilled with the
I didn't. She came to the house today.
I haven't seen anybody use one of those
It's
for
a theater
so long.
Well,
And
What's
the
the
rest of the
matter?
area around there is.
they have their
town park.
purposes.
Well, now,
It's
how do you
beginning
have them
to
developed?
differ.
That modern?
Well, it's not, the museum is not on the road. You drive in through
Yeah.
the orchard. She was one of the people who started the museum. But the museum has different rooms. For instance, there's a forestry room that is really interesting because that was the big thing around it.
This is in Sedona, Tisha's house. This is the museum in Sedona, Historical Museum, Jordan House Museum, which used to be an apple orchard. And Cynthia works here part-time as a docent. There's lots of booths selling things. It's a sort of craft show or a crap show. That is Cynthia. I mean Tisha. And Cynthia. I'm just checking the Zoom was making a lot of crackling noises. Seems to be all right.
You have to park somewhere else. Get another location.
We have stadium.
Well, you just have like, we have one side of the south, and then it's like, oh, there's also, it ain't like,
It's all right. We're in Red Rock Friday night. But anyways, He likes to look good in the meetings.
Where's Tisha from?
Check out.
Should I charge him a fee for posting?
He's always going to buy copies. When Daphne and Will sent a beautiful orchid. Oh, it's a purple and white orchid.
Well, we're going to
Don't
look
put
at
it in
full
the
time starting next year.
No, I won't. But you can tell me later.
Yeah.
Bye, George. I'm so glad. Can you film tomorrow, George?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, great.
I told him I charge for
A
posting.
little bit, yeah.
I told Minnie that.
It's pretty high-tech stuff, so. Yeah, I mean, the intake manifold's all sheet metal.
You can have some bread.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
I
yeah.
think, no, I'm going to wait. I think he's
116
waiting.
octane. That's $6.
Oh, now how did get soup already?
Did you bring it with you?
Oh, yeah.
Did you get, ML, did you talk to George?
Yeah, very briefly because it's too loud.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's one of the ones with the parachute, and the thing in the back so you can flip over. Wheelie bars. It looks like a smart car, right? Right.
We like the same.
Oh, Cynthia said the trout
I
is very
meant the
good.
salmon.
Oh, salmon, there's two different
I'll
types.
send you some pictures.
Volkswagen?
Kirby had gotten her that car or
And my
something.
neighbor finally said, could you move the car?
No, but then walking by it, he said it was...
Oh.
Remember you drove the car up from
Yes.
to Vermont? No, the Volkswagen, Daddy's bringing it.
Yes.
But when she parked the car, it was a little too close to the house, so I was carrying a box in. And so didn't want to hit her car, so I had the box. Meanwhile, my balls were rubbing up against the stucco of the house.
And she had no keys. Cindy did not leave the keys.
No.
No. So he could never move.
So
the
Sherry, I said, Sherry goes, how long is this car going to be here? I said, 4 months.
No, it was 8 months. It was 8. She was gone 8 months.
No, Cindy's thing is,
No, it's the old.
Cindy once wrote me a letter from
I can't read
Africa.
with George looking at me with a camera. So
Cindy wrote me a letter from Africa, Rich.
what?
She wrote me a letter from Africa, and this was the letter. Dear Aunt Carol.
Who wrote this?
Cindy, I'm in Africa now. I want to tell you where I'm sitting. I'm sitting in a tent, and I'm looking at a bug. And the bug is very beautiful. Its wings are very beautiful. It has a nest nearby. This was the, I know.
Yes, she was. I got a letter too. It said, "Dear Mom and Kirby, I'm sitting in the same tent, and there are mosquitoes on one hand and moths on the other. What do you think would happen if a mosquito went over to the moth area?" I called her immediately, dead, and I said, "Obviously you're on drugs. I mean, there's something wrong." And apparently she was. She and the police chief. Yeah, the police chief was the procurer of the drugs. I couldn't believe my ears, eyes.
This year. No, it was this year.
This is Oak Creek Canyon. I'm taking a movie of it.
That's so cute, George. And your lovely chauffeur is sitting right here.
Yes.
It'd just be so wonderful to have a house here.
It
Unbelievable.
would be, but you're saying that they're very, very expensive.
Very expensive and not fancy. They're just basically cabins.
Yeah. But I can see how people would want a little cabin here as a change, you know?
It's pretty rustic for Tisha.
Yeah.
Be a high maintenance cabin.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
And we had been to my brother's wedding in Sacramento. We were flying out of Reno. Cocky was in charge. We had a huge rental, like a Lincoln Continental.
Dad was there.
Huge car. It's switchbacks like this, going all the way through the Sierra. and down. You have to go down into Reno. Cocky drove like an insane person. She'd go very fast. Now, please bear in mind, we're going down the hill. She'd drive very fast to the hairpin turn, then jerk the brakes on. Our necks were just, rocks are falling.
Look at this view on the left. George, did you see that?
He's filming it.
Yeah. I'll get it on the way back. So see that.
This is like going up to Mount Ray.
That's weird. I'm sure that's a Robert ism right there.
Go up there without an adult next to you.
Can't climb it without one of us here. Okay, go ahead.
Big football player at Yale. Wait,
He was a prince. He was actually a member of the royal family.
his father played for the Washington Redskins.
Right?
This tape, or DVD, was made on Saturday evening, November 19, 2005, at the Douglas House Museum in Jerome, Arizona, to record the commemoration of the life of Paul Nonast, arranged by his wife, Mary Louise.
Hi, George, for posing, George.
Boy, it's windy.
Oh, we forgot to take a picture. Oh, your scarf. Here's George's scarf.
Oh.
It's right there.
Yeah, she was like, this is my strong and something.
They were getting
Good, I'm doing fine. How about you? I'm glad you're carrying those. Carrie got those.
I know.
I've got another jacket. Just my hands are cold. That's what's
diagnosed with cancer in January.
Of time on it.
But 3 weeks ago, our life changed forever. And so did my story. Nothing had prepared us for the thief. It came. I was thrown. I can't ask why Paul through all of this is bicycling. For him, the bike is life. Through seamless, fluid movement of this instrument, he covers great distances outside of home, repeating one motion, one breath, one awakening. His meditation towards the horizon has to do with the soul, nothing. The other day he said he was grateful. I'm not sure why or for what reason. And he didn't want to question for fear that through words his feeling would go away. Paul truly is contemporary. One man who never believed in war is now battling the revolution inside himself.
It's just like ML to put on a party like this. It feels so at home and so all of Jerome and so sad and happy at the same time. I'm really glad I'm here. My mom, Diane Rappaport, wrote something. She couldn't come. Of course she'd be here if she could. And before I start, I also wanted to say that my children, Aaron and Robin, really wanted to come and thought hard about if there was a way they could, and would have been here to show their love. For Paul and Emil, a tribute to the human spirit. I was in England when I first heard that Paul had esophageal cancer. When I called, the first words out of Paul's mouth were, "Don't ever consider me a dead man." I said I would not. What did that promise mean? To me, Paul, Emil, or their friends? How could you not consider the possibility of Paul's becoming a dead man? Last August, I drove down to Jerome from Hines, Oregon, and stayed with Paul and Emil for 10 days. I walked in just before dinner. Emil had redecorated the living room with some of the beautiful antiques and art that her mother had collected and left for her, and set the table with her mom's beautiful placemats. Candles turned everything soft. The room was cloaked with her mother's warm spirit. And perhaps it was no coincidence that I walked into the house wearing the scarf Emil had given me that had belonged to her mom. It still carried with it the faint perfume that she often wore. And I knew with great certainty in my heart that people stay alive inside us. There was absolutely no sickness vibe, the way some houses carry when someone has an illness. Even though Paul was in some pain from an embolism in his leg, their home was a warm, vibrant, nurturing, and peaceful. It was how Emil wanted home to feel, and it was a testimony to her spirit that she had achieved it. Then I went to Paul's house to sleep. Virtually everything there was shaped, textured, arranged, and made by Paul, all incredible art pieces in his distinct and unmistakable style. The kitchen cabinets made from the cabinetry that used to house the Bunsen burners from the chemistry room, my first office in the old high school. The sconces made from Chinese woks. The light fixtures made of tin applesauce mashers. The ostrich egg lamps. Curtain rods that beautifully hung a collection of textured fabrics from Africa and South America. Tools. Paul's paintings, the maquettes of the graceful sculpture that won him runner-up in the Vietnam War Memorial Competition for Washington, D.C. I loved setting the obelisk in motion and doing a Qigong exercise known as cloud hands with it. Being inside his home was very much like being inside Paul's head. And the more you were in there, the more there was to know, feel, and think about. But when Paul's home came most richly alive for me was the night when I lit every light, lamp, and sconce and set the sculptures into motion. The light wove and danced into patterned tapestries on the walls, ceilings, floors, and windows. Everything in that room had a provocative and elegant sensuality. I started dancing and whirling with the light. When I told Paul, he grinned and told me that was how he wanted his home to be experienced. I told him I would carry that dance with me in my heart for a long time. The last night the three of us spent together was pure magic. After dinner, we went out to the hot tub, naked right to our souls. The moon was full and ripe, its a clear light burning right through us, softening all the shapes and shadows around us, nurturing, protective, yielding, soft, feminine in its essence, a perfection of the yin. The moon was in the middle of a wide path of sky that was flanked on either side by tumultuous black clouds that spit out lightning, revealing the shapes of the mountains, the colors of the distant red rocks. Thunder pealed down the canyons, wave after wave. The wind shook the sky, an intimidating storm, strong, implacable, fierce, male in its essence, a perfection of the yang. And the magic of that night and the metaphor that it held was that both these wonderful human beings, ML and Paul, embodied inside themselves both yin and yang. They were equals to each other. In their quest for the enrichment of their lives, ML and Paul's intimacy, passion, and love for each other had grown and enveloped them, and all they knew, just as the magic of the night was now doing. In their courage to open their hearts towards life, they found and embraced within themselves and for each other the great human virtues, kindness, honesty, generosity, compassion, and wisdom. These are the spirits that never die. And that's why I can continue to fulfill my promise to Paul. I still do not consider him a dead man.
I think ML would appreciate that, and Paul's mom and the family would appreciate anything that you have to write in the book. The next person that's going to come up and talk to us is going to be Brandy, and my eyesight ain't so great with these glasses on. So anyway, Brandy, if you wanted to come up, it's your turn.
One time, after his first bout of cancer, he was still fighting it. He called me, ML and Paul called me because they had found two baby animals in the parking lot near their house, and they're both really worried, so I like to help out critters when I can. And so I went to Paul, and he looked dapper as usual. He looked tired, and he had these two little teeny baby rabbits, and I remember thinking, oh God, these guys are goners, you know. But he had just been fighting, and he was so magnificent standing there. So we got food in him, and he held the animals in such a way that just his reverence for life really reminded me about just being strong and brave. And I remember he never really had to say anything. He would see me and know exactly where I was. And I was talking to ML about it, and she was like, it reminded me that I said he was just so mighty and silent. And I really wanted to work on becoming more like that. And I thought about this quote that a friend of ours who has spent a lot of time with the DNA people, the Navajo people, and we were talking about how Paul was sort of like, he would sit and observe like this strong, stoic, majestic person that just took everything in and would only occasionally say what was on his mind, but when he did, it was time to listen because you were going to learn something great. And it reminded me of my friend that said, with the Navajo people, when you're working with them or talking with them or just amongst them, the first one that speaks loses. And Mel's an amazing woman, and their connection is inspiring for us all to be good to each other and love each other and work through thick and thin and be brave. Thanks, you guys.
See you tonight. Am I going to be loud enough? Can everybody hear me like this? Oh, God, all right, here we go. All right. Now we can hear you. All right. I know Paul is really happy that all you guys are gathered here tonight. I wrote, being a control freak, I needed to write my thing down. It's always hard to get a good first sentence, so I stole one from ML. It was, as it said on the card hanging in the post office, Paul known as longtime resident of Jerome. Paul loved the physical beauty, the vistas, the geology, the old-time funkiness, and the dynamic, ever-changing weather of Jerome. Paul was born in the rolling hills of Pennsylvania. He lived in British Columbia and studied art design there. He then apprenticed himself with Paulo Solari in Scottsdale and at Arcasani Cordes Junction. From there, his journey brought him to Jerome. When Paul first came to town, he lived at the clubhouse on Hill Street. The 1970s were a sort of rebirth for Jerome, and Paul, in choosing among the various options, was guided to his lots on the Dundee. As I remembered in those days, the low desert vegetation, the dead-end dirt road dissecting the ridgetop, and the wind. The Dundee is many things, and one of them is a marvelous sort of natural wind tunnel. And as the lyrics of the song, and as Paul would say, the answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. Paul's essence guided him to the Dundee. It was an open, empty canvas for him. He was not constrained by any existing historical structure. His was not a labor of remodeling or renovation. When the weather allowed, Paul moved to his lots. He many times shared his fond memories of those years, living in the open, cooking and camping, and most of all, sleeping under the stars after a day of hard work. Back in those days, there was no place to rent backhoes and such. So it was Paul, his pick, shovel, and rock bar. I remember Paul's old truck from those days. The paint on the doors did not match the fenders, but it was like Paul, strong and solid. Under the hood was a V8 blueprinted racing engine. It had 7 main bearings instead of the normal 5. With that truck, a wheelbarrow, and a mortar hoe, he embarked on the creative expression and process that his first stone house was to become. Paul's unique individuality, his acceptance of hard physical labor, his artistic problem-solving approach, combined to yield an architecture of flowing ramps, barrel vaults, patios, pools, skylights, stone masonry. It takes a particular personality type to build with stone and concrete. We all know the childhood story of the 3 little pigs and how their building choices were put to the test by the wolf. Certainly huffing and puffing will never blow down anything Paul ever built. On the contrary, I would put forth the contention that 100 years from now, long after fire, termites, and peeling paint have rendered rubble out of the metaphorical houses of straw and sticks, Paul's work will soldier on, somehow fitting in with the Indian ruins and stone pueblos cloistered away in the canyons within view of Dundee Ridge. In the early 1980s, Paul designed an entry for the Vietnam War Memorial in our nation's capital. His talents and efforts were rewarded with a prestigious honorable mention in the design competition. Also here in the 80s, Paul worked with the Jerome Instrument Company, consulting and designing the cases that housed the company's various instruments. True to his nature, it was a hands-on approach. He acquired the metal brakes, the drill presses, the lathes, to make the cases right in his workshop on the Dundee. Again, his sense of design and attention to detail contributed to the overall success of the business. As the late 1980s unfolded, Paul once again returned to the love of his youth when he resumed cycling. Paul described it as a decision to deal with some competitive urges he was feeling. Paul entered the Mingus Mountain Hill Climb in 1989. This was a sanctioned United States Cycling Federation event for road bikes that started down in Clarkdale at the gazebo and proceeded up 89A through Jerome and to the top of the mountain. It's a distance of 12 miles and about 3,500 feet of climbing. Needless to say, Paul won the citizens class in a time of 58 minutes and some seconds. Quite an athletic achievement. It meant a lot to him. The winning time is scratched in the paint on the lid of a small toolbox he kept his bike tools in. Another story I would like to share that captures some of who Paul was, involves his amateur status as an ADOT employee. ADOT is the Arizona Department of Transportation. Over the last 15 years, Paul has been a member of a loosely organized early morning riding group. It varied, of course, at different times. Maybe at its highest intensity, he rode to the top of Mingus 5 mornings out of 7. That's about 250 trips in a year. Paul rode in the rain. He rode in the snow. He rode as the sun rose. He saw deer, mountain lions, and javelina. He had squirrels dash between his wheels. Well, back to the ADOT employee part. As Paul rode the mountain, Paul would always take the time to remove any little debris or rocks from the lanes of the road as he was climbing the hill, to break his pedaling rhythm, to take one foot off the pedal, kick the rock to the edge, then start again and have to catch up. Made it that much harder for him. I always viewed it as a personal meditation he did, a testimony to his physical fitness and his own standard of neatness and the rule of orderliness. I am sure he also did it for everyone's safety, realizing how dangerous it was descending the mountain at speeds above 50 miles an hour and to hit even the smallest of rocks. While Paul was first and foremost a road rider, he also loved riding his mountain bike on the dirt fire roads around the Verde Valley. He logged many full moon night rides to the Perkinsville Bridge and many daylight rides to destinations on the Perkinsville Road. In 2004, he rode to Williams, Arizona, 52 miles and 5,000 feet of climbing in under 4 hours. Like other travelers who have their own list of things they want to see, bicyclists have hill climbs they want to do before they die. In the summer, before he was diagnosed with cancer, Paul spent 2 weeks camping and riding every day in Colorado. Paul was able to bag one of those lifetime climbs. It was Mount Evans. The ride starts outside of Idaho Springs and climbs 44 miles. At the end, it is way above tree line, amongst granite rocks blasted by storms and lightning. There are alpine lakes the color of turquoise stones, and marmots sticking their heads out of cracks in the rocks as you pedal up the switchbacks into the thin air. It's the highest automobile road in the world and reaches an elevation of 14,260 feet. It is normally ridden on road bikes, but Paul had only brought his mountain bike to Colorado. So on that July afternoon, after reaching the summit, it was time for the descent. Paul's competitive juices were flowing. And as a group of road bikes passed, Paul accelerated. Even though his own bike was heavier, had greater rolling resistance, and was less aerodynamic, he decided to try and stay with these much younger and faster cyclists. As the miles ticked away through the rolling sections around the mountainous curves, no matter how hard the road bike guys rode, they could not shake Paul off. This was the equivalent of a Volkswagen racing side by side with Ferraris. Well, needless to say, by the time the bottom was reached, Paul had these guys' eyes literally bugging out of their brains in a combination of frustration and admiration.
Oh,
wait, we'll move the speakers. That's a better idea.
Okay. Can everybody still hear me? ML and Paul came into my life and my husband's life in the early 80s. And ML did the visuals for our wedding announcements. I met my husband at the Grand Canyon, thought he was going to jump, prayed for this gentleman for 45 minutes, and he jumped out, and the rest is history. We've been together 23 years now, but Paul and ML were influential. ML, I did this friendship journal, and on every page there's a quote or something special based in existence. Sir Isaac Newton said he got as far as he did because he stood on the shoulders of others, and that, of course, is through the reading process. He didn't have videos in his day. And I'm a reading specialist. I try to break young minds out of the prison where they can't read or write as a professor and as a teacher in the public schools. I wrote this that I want to read to ML and Paul. Knowing Paul and ML since the late 70s has been a joy of mine. I remember how Paul helped me put together my slant board device using a steel slab, and to this day, my back and neck are relieved of pressure by slanting at 45 degrees for up to an hour a day. Because of the nature of reality in our spaceship, we came into this holographic universe naked, and we leave naked. Paul rests. ML is a heroine, and Paul a hero. I will now read my dad's favorite poem, which is mine as well. My quote at the very top, with a little child embraced by two strong male hands, is by Dr. Albert Einstein. He says, there are two ways you can live your life. One is as though nothing is a miracle. The other is though everything is a miracle. Anyone who has ever come into my life has been a miracle to me because I'm not supposed to be alive. All the heroes of the nations will be gathered for the sight, for the author of creation, sundering daylight from the night. When the final bugle summons, they will gather from afar. He will read out their promotions, pin on each a morning star. Rank on rank of marching billions tramping over heaven's sod, captains, housewives, inventors, ditch diggers, all pass equal before Yahweh. They wear ribbons from the sunset, they wear medals of the suns, and the thunder and the lightning flash salute from heaven's guns. And the whirling of the planets will be music for the band when the author of creation takes the great receiving stand. I look forward to being there with the individuals that have affected my life and helped me appreciate consciousness. Because whether you're sitting or standing, it's a miraculous event. Thank you.
I didn't know they knew I was going to do this. Each of us has our own relationships with Paul, and as we think of Paul, different things resonate as true. Hopefully, some of what my relationship has been will be true for you, and what I say evokes a smile or even a bit of emotion, for we know the same to be true of him for us. Paul was his own man. He demanded his dignity in the light of staggering odds. He would retreat within and maintain. He honored his work. He knew his value. One of the things that was true for me was that I had a sense that Paul made choices for himself. I have often thought he set boundaries for himself. He could have been celebrated at every turn, famous, an artist in the limelight, center stage and all that. Celebrated and publicly honored. My God, he was handsome enough to carry it off. He had that dry little humor. He had that wry little smile and secretive dance in his eye.
It is no mistake that Paul stayed in Jerome. He made choices. He honored his life, experiences, and measured his energies and played them out for what he valued most. If you had his attention, it was always an honor, and you couldn't help but feel special when he spent his special time with you. I think that if you had the slightest modicum of sense, you knew this man was exceptional. Paul could have easily have been in the limelight, yet he chose the sidelight. He knew his worth and his value. His work is stunning, yet so quiet. He had a privateness about him that defied penetration. He had a dignity, a self-worth that he refused to sell out on. His deep sensitivity, his fragility. I think back now, and I think he knew how fragile he was. I saw him take risks, like doing the pop culture training called the Forum, and I watched him enter, quiet, remote, dark. And then I watched him emerge, face smooth, eyes fragile, vulnerable, moved, yearning to stay open, available, respectful. Paul, a consummate engineer, a precision artist, a sensitive and observant being. Paul helped me buy my bicycle. He negotiated all the best parts for my bike. He adjusted it, fitted it to my body. My God, I thought I had the best bike. No one had a bike as special as mine. Didn't Paul Nonas know? Master of custom bikes for the fastidious, fanatical rider. For those who demanded only the best with precision everything, just like the precision Paul. I was like a kid with his first bike. Paul created the magic around that bike, the mystique. Everyone who touched that bike or saw that bike remarked about it. But it wasn't the bike. It was Paul. It was like his junk. Did you ever see his junk? So meticulously cataloged, stacked, and stored. Did your eye be ever so altered in its seeing? No, it was Paul. He was like a Reiki healer of all he touched. He was extremely select in where he put his trust to allow himself to be vulnerable. And again, to all who knew him, observed and watched him, he did that with ML. I am sure he knew who she was and wasn't. I am sure he knew the dangers, the joys, but he chose. And he was steadfast. He honored her. It was clear. My favorite memories? I got to be all alone in his old house, to be the only person there and to sleep in the room with the stacked stone walls. I knew it was one of his ways of being close to you, to let you in by showing you his work. He showed me how to step out in the simplest ways. He introduced me to eating cold cereal with fruit juice instead of milk. He showed me stone walls that he had built. They're all around Jerome. These walls on the curves in the road, walls that secure embankments. He pointed out that there wasn't any mortar because he had selected each stone to fit. I had never known what went into a stone wall, especially a beautiful wall. Actually, my eyes had never seen the beauty before, like I saw after he showed me his walls. I have never looked at a stone wall the same since. As I reread all of this, I realized that my favorite memory of Paul was letting you into anything that Paul held dear. When he told you about anything he was excited about, you ended up feeling like you were special. Maybe it was because you felt let in on a secret.
I wanted to tell you that I had the privilege and the honor to be in on the first day of this love affair between Mary Louise and Paul, and I was there on the last day. About almost 25 years ago, I came up to visit ML, and we were at her house down in the Gulch, and she said, there is this divine guy that I want to go meet, and he's at a bar. but you talk too much, Tisha. So you are not supposed to say anything. So I remember it was a cute little place beyond the spirit room, and whatever it was the haunted something. And we walk in, and dark little tables, and he's off in the corner, and Mary Louise sits next to him, and I sit across, but nobody says anything. And so, you know, hour after hour, they're just staring at each other, and I don't know what to do. And so I started to hyperventilate and have panic attacks, and I said, I can't take this anymore. I'm going home. So I was basically summarily dismissed. And about 3 hours later, he drives her home, and I said, what was that? Oh, that was the scariest date I've ever been on. No, you never said a word. And she said, we didn't need to. We were looking into each other's souls. And whatever happened, that soul connection lasted for 20-odd years. And lots of fun family functions in between. He was one of the few husbands that was greeted well by the family. So that was good. Then the last day, Marie and ML had left the room for a moment, and I was lying very quietly next to Paul. And I said, Paul, do you know how well you are loved and respected by all of your family and your friends? And he didn't say anything for a moment, and he just turned his head and he said, you know, I think I'm beginning to understand. What a great way to leave this earth, knowing that you're loved, you have given so much to friends and family, and so loved in return. And I just wanted to thank you all from the family, of which we're all here, for taking such good care of Paul and being such a good friend, and for taking care of Mary Louise, because she's going to really need you guys now. Thank you so much for being here.
This piece was written by Katie, and it came from a little correspondence that Katie and I had. Katie writes short stories for this little magazine that I edit from time to time. And I sent her a short story that somebody had written that I thought would be of interest to her about guitars. And so at the end of my letter, which was, I think, on Sunday, I said, I really miss Paul. And she wrote back this to me, and she told me that she had been invited to speak here tonight, and that she didn't have a thing to say. She didn't know what she would say. And this is how she explained she didn't know what to say. And that's hard for Katie. About Paul. Well, I can't find anything to say because Paul isn't gone, at least not for me. I don't miss him because he's still very much here. And anything I might say about him I feel is going to somehow embarrass him. He's a hard taker-honor of praise, a master tinkerer with deep thoughts. And though he'd forgive me in a heartbeat, I feel inadequately prepared to speak about him while he's watching me fumble around for the right words. Right words. Phooey. There are no right words. If I start thanking him for all the things he's done for me in the past, like going to Flag with me to help me pick out the bike I now own, plus keeping it in repair, coming with ML to see me in the hospital after my crash on that bicycle, if I thank him, he'll just look at me over his dark glasses and say, so? As if that's what anyone would do and doesn't require a thanks. Every time I've seen him this last month, I've half wondered if it might be the last time. And well, you know it isn't. I see him oftener and clearer than ever before, and I figure that has everything to do with the personality, the honesty, the artistry, the will, with behavior to match, of an unforgettable, extremely visible human being named Paul, ever loving his woman ML, always learning. A man with a frown and a smile that is Cheshire Cattish and contagious. Katie. So thank you, Katie.
This is from John McNerney. Our friendship began because of a hamster cage that Paul had built. Wait, I'm sorry. Let me start again. Our friendship began because of a hamster cage that Paul built while living at John Waddell's studio. Upon seeing the cage, I was immediately curious about the person who would spend so much time getting into the mind of a hamster and that would have the ability to translate what he found into a work of art. I can't speak for the hamster, but I was impressed. We met soon after at Paul and Jerry's, of course, and began our work relationship and friendship that continued over 30 years. We were mentors to each other. Paul taught me many things. Where I would find a rock and admire its texture and shape, Paul would smell and taste the rock, sampling all of its dimensions. When he showed up one day on a bike, I roared with laughter at the idea of pedaling up the mountain we all lived on. But I was soon following him and have been an avid rider to this day. We sought each other's approval. So I salute Paul, a man who lived his life to his purpose, followed no one, and no one walked more erect. It is astonishingly difficult to imagine Paul gone. In fact, as long as we are alive, Paul is here. We have worked and played with Paul. While he was courageously fighting for his life, we worked with him in designing our new home in Taos. We live with his brilliant aesthetic sense and know his strong concern for our specific wishes. Paul made sure that the house he was creating was cozy for us. Paul and ML visited us this last summer. It was Paul's only time to see his creation, our new home as reality. His modesty, excitement, and then enjoyment as he experienced his mind's work was a joy for us to behold. A stone wall work in progress drew his attention, and as the day went on, he kept adding stones to it, and relishing the physicality? Yep. Sorry. And sense of the strength that it gave him. We will always have Paul with us, surrounded by his ideas and his presence. ML has equaled Paul's courage in her caring for him, being herself through such a life's challenge. We love you both from our hearts, Jacqueline and Bob.
Eggs? The eggs are ready.
Sean, you're being photographed.
I know, I see that. I'm not sure what to do. Can you do this?
So, breakfast is ready.
Butter for that?
This is for somebody.
Yes, it's there. Here. No, it isn't. Actually, it's fine.
There you go. Butter.
It's chainsaw.
No, it isn't.
Just put it in the mic for a minute.
Is there enough bacon?
It's all right stuff.
No, it doesn't freeze. My looks show what
All right, next. Okay.
Here. Here.
There's English muffins coming for this. So a little friction.
Little friction here.
Feel it.
Cool.
Okay, here's some more English muffins.
Chainsaw time with the butter.
Okay, and here's another one, James, right here.
Did George get his?
Is there any way you could stick this?
George?
Yeah.
Okay.
Chainsaw.
Here we go. Cynthia, it's always been perfect. No, I actually wanted that.
I was up 3 hours ago.
Did you have any coffee?
Oh, yeah. I went down to the store because Cindy doesn't have coffee.
Okay, did you have anything to eat?
No. No.
Oh, okay, because I was highly charged.
Right, Rich?
Yes?
But didn't you know about the breakfast? Oh, hi, bro. You knew about my water thing?
What time is breakfast?
My friend Walter just came to
We're trying to get
cut
as
the
much as
pie.
possible.
Just have me cereal.
Oh, I gave.
What? I gave.
It's like my house.
George's
At
breakfast.
my house,
Because he has two.
works.
What
Ceiling's gone.
Is that because we got up at 8 early? But then just pretend and eat some more. We are.
No, I had this peacock situation. Doesn't matter.
George, tell me which portion. Once you're sitting there, I'll take some with you and it's too.
Okay. All right.
Okay, your question is.
Okay, everybody, take your places, take your places. Record. All right, does anybody want to sing a song or anything? So we can, we're on video. Oh boy.
Look at me and what do you see?
Don't give up your day.
One beautiful person.